see everybody this morning. We are ready. We're in Matthew 27. We're going to start at verse 38 this morning. We got to verse 38. We've talked about, of course, we're talking about the crucifixion of Jesus, and where we left off with the sign being hung over the cross that Pilate actually hung, saying that he acknowledged him as King of the Jews, even though the Jews didn't want to recognize that. I think he saw something there that he did see, that he was actually this Messiah. He was the King of the Jews. So we're going to start there at verse 38. If you smell a skunk smell this morning, evidently behind the building back here, I don't know if we got skunks under one of the buildings or something, but it's coming in, so it's not me. It's somewhere else. But we do have a little bit of a skunk issue going on. So let's read 38 through 44, and then we'll discuss it. It said, "Then two robbers were crucified with him, one on the right and another on the left. And those who passed by blasphemed him, wagging their heads and saying, 'You who destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross.' Likewise the chief priests also, mocking with the scribes and elders, said, 'He saved others, himself he cannot save. If he is the King of Israel, let him come down from the cross, and we will believe him. He trusted in God, let him deliver him now if he will have him. For he said, I am the Son of God.' Even the robbers who were crucified with him reviled him with the same thing." So we see here as he's hanging on the cross, it says two robbers were crucified with him, one on the right, one on the left. And you know, every depiction of that we see three crosses on a hill, three people being crucified, and they crucified them all three at the same time. It's interesting that as he's hanging there, here we've got these passing by, and they're blaspheming him even as he's being crucified. And they're challenging him. And yeah, I thought about this. You know, if you're the ones that you were in Christ's hands, and you're in where he was, and here they're coming by, he's hanging on the cross, and now they're mocking him. They've already done all these things to blaspheme him and mock him and make fun of him. They've got him on this cross, and they're challenging him. And said, "You said that you would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days." And of course, they misunderstand that totally. He was talking about, of course, his body. He wasn't talking about the actual temple. They misunderstood. Said, "If you say you can do that, then if you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." In other words, prove yourself. And they even went to the point, that the chief priests and the scribes and the elders, those who really had him crucified, they acknowledged, I thought this was interesting, that they acknowledged that he had saved other people. So they said he saved other people, but himself he cannot save. Now, how could they not believe who he was when they saw these miracles, that he had even healed the sick and cast out demons? They acknowledged he had done all those things. Yet they weren't willing to acknowledge that he had that power to do those things before they were going to crucify him, because they denied he had any power at all. And I thought it was interesting. Now they're even admitting that he saved other people. He had this power, but now he can't save himself. So he says, if you are the King of Israel, and if you are who you say you are, you trust in God to deliver you, if you'll come down, we'll believe you. Now, don't you think in Jesus' mind it was very tempting at that point? I mean, human nature would say, I'm going to show you then. I'm going to challenge you if you're going to challenge. And I thought, what if he had have done that? What if he had come down from the cross? Of course, that wasn't God's plan. Would they have believed him then? No.
I don't think so, because they've already accused him once of this power being coming from the devil,
right,
and not God.
Right.
So that would be something that to me would be temporary.
Right. Yeah, they were saying before, when he did all these miracles, he did it by the power of Beelzebub, or they were by Satan. They wouldn't acknowledge his power. Now they are, but they're saying, if you'll come down, we'll believe you. Well, they wouldn't have believed him then. But this wasn't the plan, and it says, he didn't even say a word. in defense of himself. I'd at least want to say, well, y'all just wait. Y'all just wait a few days. Y'all going to bury me, but I'm coming out. Y'all just wait. I'm going to show you. But that shows the humility of Christ in this, that he's going through, he's in this pain and agony hanging on the cross, and now they're blaspheming him, mocking him, challenging him to show his power, but yet he's not even saying a word back to them. And it says, even the robbers who were crucified with him reviled him with the same thing. Now here's these two robbers that are being crucified with him at the same time, and it says they're even reviling. They're even talking about it. If you turn over to Luke 23, he gives a little bit more in his account about these robbers and what they were saying about him. Let me find that part of it. Go to verse 39 of Luke chapter 23. It says, then one of the criminals who were hanged blasphemed him, saying, if you are the Christ, save yourself and us. And the other answering rebuked him, saying, do you not even fear God, seeing you are under the same condemnation? We indeed justly, for we receive the due reward of our deeds, but this man has done nothing wrong. Then Jesus said to him, Lord, remember me. He said to Jesus, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus said to him, and surely I say to you, you will be with me in paradise. Today you will be with me in paradise. So here's two robbers, one on the right, one on the left. One of them is reviling him and blaspheming and saying these vile things about, if you're really the king of the Jews, if you're this Savior you're saying, if you are the Christ. It's interesting, he said, save yourself and what? And us. It's like he was more interested in himself, I think, than he was Christ. So he said, you save yourself and us at the same time. And the other one says, are you, even at this point of death, going to rebuke this man who is the Christ? You're at this point of death, and you're going to be rebuking this man who's the Christ. And he said, we're hanging here for the right reasons. He said, we're paying for our deeds. We're being hanged, but we're hung on a cross, but guess what? We did the crime. This man's innocent. He believed that Jesus was innocent. That he's being crucified for the wrong reasons. And then Jesus there says, today you will be with me in paradise. How do you think that man felt when he heard Jesus say that? Think about that. Today you'll be with me in paradise. And so there's been a lot of people that will come back and say, well, look at there. He wasn't baptized or any of the things we talk about today, but yet he was saved. So that just proves you don't have to be baptized or the other things we have in the New Testament. So how do we react to that when somebody says, well, look, the thief on the cross was saved and he wasn't baptized, so that means we don't have to be baptized.
But he ain't died yet, though.
The church is not even in effect at this time. The new law is not in effect at this time. They're still under the old law. Did Jesus have the power to forgive sins at this point? This is not the first time he's done that. He's forgiven sins several times during his ministry here on earth, and we don't have a new law yet. They're still under the old covenant, the old law. And Jesus himself even lived under the old law and kept the old law. So they're still there. So nothing has been changed at this point until Christ is resurrected from the grave. His death, burial, and resurrection. That's what baptism really mimics, is that death, burial, resurrection. And that's why he says that.
Speaking of two thieves, I was curious. Crucifixion is considered the worst possible punishment. So I would think that would be reserved for rape and murder and whatnot.
Yeah.
Is that common for thieves?
Evidently it was, because it said they were both robbers. Of course, we don't know what they might have done in addition to, these robberies. It could have been that they were, Barabbas, they said, he was a notorious criminal.
Right.
Yeah, so they might have had other things beforehand that this happened, that they were, they were going to be crucified. But yeah, they were crucified there. Should we have that today? Good question, isn't it?
I don't believe that these two criminals were strangers to Jesus.
Yeah.
A lot of us who look at it's never seen these people before. You gotta remember though, the Samaritan in John, she had never met him before either,
Right,
and he knew about it.
right.
So I have a feeling he knew something about these two men already.
Good answer.
And also, when he picked his disciples, they weren't strangers to him.
Yeah.
He picked them out because he knew them.
He knew their heart. Yeah,
Right.
right. He knew their heart. Absolutely. And these men probably would have known Jesus at that time because his fame was widespread. And of course, they would have been there during, while he was on trial and all those things. They obviously would have seen all those things going on, what he was accused of. And this one realized that he was being falsely accused. He realized that. So because of that, he said, we don't need to be reviling him. And because of that, this man was saved because of it. And so I think that's interesting that one of them believed to the point that he acknowledged Christ as the Christ. And because of that, he was saved. The other one was still mocking and concerned about himself. Hey, save yourself and us too. Get us down off the cross. So any other comments on that before we move on?
Jesus said, "You'll be with me in paradise today." Are we talking about instantaneous judgment and direction you're going in? I mean, just
What is paradise?
I would define it as heaven. For some people, there's layers of it.
So the question of life immediately after death has always been a mystery, if you will. The only reference we have to that is when the rich man and Lazarus both died, and they both went into what we would call the Hadean realm. We know that the rich man was in Hades, being punished. The other one was in Abraham's bosom, which would have been referenced as paradise. So when we die, the soul goes somewhere. And this reference, when you ask the question, what happens to us? We know the spirit leaves the body. The body is just a body at that point. But the spirit then, the only reference we have is going into this Hadean realm, where there is a place of, we see the rich man was being punished, and Lazarus was in Abraham's bosom being comforted. So is that a judgment at that point? When are we judged? There's a final judgment. It says when Christ comes again, we'll stand before him, and there'll be a final judgment. But your judgment is cast when you die. I mean, there's no hope after that. Your judgment is cast at that point. So that's really all we know about that Hadean realm. I've got a sermon that I've preached before. I know all of y'all remember when I preached that sermon. but what happens life after death? My father-in-law, I still have his. This is before they had PowerPoint and all that. He took this cloth and made this whole reference of, what happens after death. And it talks about the Hadean realm, which is the only place in Scripture we see that, was the rich man and Lazarus, one's being punished, the other one's, in Abraham's bosom. And then, later on, there will be a resurrection of the dead. And it says our body will be resurrected at that point. I heard a joke this week, kind of goes along with that, I have to tell you. So there's, in Iowa, they have multiple, when they dig a grave, a lot of times they'll dig it 10 feet deep, put the first body in, and they'll put 4 feet of dirt, and then later on they'll put the next body in. So you have multiple bodies in one grave. And this guy was asked, said, well, why do y'all do that? And he said, well, it just saves, same time, he said, well, all right, and he ran to this lady, and she said, well, I don't want to be buried, and then my husband be buried on top of me. And he said, well, why not? He said, well, he's not saved, and when Jesus comes back and we raise from the graves, he'll be blocking me. I won't be able to get out. But is there some still mystery there for us? There is. But I think there's enough there that tells us when the spirit leaves the body, it goes to a place. And there again, the judgment's cast at that point. You know, you've heard people that try to pray people out of purgatory. And that's what they're talking about. They're already there in this realm being punished, and they try to give money or pray them. But at that point, it's cast, isn't it? There's no changes there. I see the final judgment when Christ comes again as being the sentencing, if you will. You know, kind of like what we had today. You're judged. You know, you're convicted, but then here's what your sentence is going to be, and that'll be an eternal sentence at that point. But that's really the only reference we have of that where the soul goes, and that had to be what he's talking about here, because he says today. It's not like, you know, we're going to be there in a little while. It's like today you're going to be with me in paradise, and there's a reference to that in Peter as well.
Maybe it says like special circumstances, and they've got almost a pass go straight to heaven with him,
Yeah.
not what it would be ordinarily.
I'll say that again.
Maybe it's not the way it would be ordinarily, but that day, those two got like a special pass.
We don't know. That's kind of a mystery, it's kind of open there. But that, like I say, reference to rich man Lazarus, the only thing gives us kind of a window picture there of what happened. So, but it's interesting that one mocks him, the other one doesn't. And he says, "Today you'll be with me," and it's a good reference. So let's read 45 through 55.
Here, I have a question.
Okay, question.
Talking about the two thieves,
Yeah.
it makes me wonder if both of them were saved. I mean, the way it reads here.
If
You know,
both of them were,
Yeah, because the one that spoke up and he says, Jesus said that he would be with him in paradise. That shall be with him in paradise. So that one guy.
I think it's talking about the one guy.
That's what
Says, then he said to Jesus, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom.
Yeah, the one.
And Jesus said to him, and surely I say to you, today you will be with me in
Okay,
paradise.
so what about the other one?
I think he's gone.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. that's yeah. I mean, that's judgment. That's judgment. But
That's what I thought, because he only told the one.
obviously, the one acknowledged Christ, was with him in paradise. The other one denied him, really. He said, prove yourself.
Yeah,
He's mocking him and reviling him like the others are.
trying to clarify that.
Yeah, and I think that's what I'm reading into this. Yeah, I think the other one is not with him in paradise, just that one of acknowledgement. Yeah, good point.
What is
Good
this
point.
statement about cast the same in his teeth?
Say again?
Cast the same in his teeth, verse 44. Thieves also which were crucified with him cast the same in his teeth.
Mine reads, even the robbers who were crucified with him reviled him with the same thing. And how does yours read again?
Cast the same in his teeth.
Is it 34?
Cast this 44. Cast the same in his teeth. I think that's meaning he said the same thing. Is what that would be referencing to. Because he said they reviled him, saying the same thing. Reviled him the same thing. So there was both. Yeah. The other one said, no, this is the Christ. He acknowledged him as the Christ. Absolutely. So I think he's saying they were saying the same thing the priest and the scribes and all those were saying about him. That's an odd way of putting it, isn't it? Yeah.
When we go further, you don't want to beat this horse to death, but judgment. Is there one judgment or two judgments? I mean, if one's going to hell, one's going to the Aegean realm, it seems to me like the cast is made, and that's the direction you're headed.
Yeah.
What's the second judgment?
So there's a judgment that he talks about, a judgment, which is an eternal judgment. When we die, it's judgment cast at that point. it's not, I wouldn't say that it's the judgment, because he says when Jesus comes again, that's when the final judgment will be. But the judgment is cast. In other words, your destiny is cast when you pass from this earth. Now,
Your fate is sealed because you can't do
yeah,
anything.
right, your fate is sealed at that point. Now, we could call that a judgment, but the final judgment, what we would call the judgment, is on that judgment day. And like I say, I think that's the sentencing day, if you will, for eternity. That's your sentencing day for eternity. But your lot's cast when you die. You know, there is no changing at that point what your direction is going to be, because we have no reference ever of anything changing after death. Nothing changes there. Yeah.
I'm wondering if Christ doesn't come back every time of death, and that is the point of him coming back and judging.
Yeah, I think that he talks about when he comes back that we'll all stand before him in judgment. And I think there is a judgment coming. But there again, is our judgment already cast at that point when we pass through this life? Yeah.
They're still gonna fail their leading.
Yeah, they're going to acknowledge him when he comes back again. It'll be too late. Be too late. Yeah.
My understanding, I can be totally wrong,
Okay.
when we have the final judgment from Jesus, because he died on the cross for our sins, he is the only one at that time that can say, I remember you and I forgive you. The option is there, but it's not any guarantees.
Well, I think at that point he gets the final. We'll stand before him in judgment. It says in judgment. And I don't think there's a point there where he could say he could save you if you're not saved. In other words, when I pass in this life, what can I do to change my destiny at that point? Nothing. So I see that judgment when we stand before Christ, and our judgment, he's going to say, here's eternal punishment at that point. That's going to be for eternity. But after death, I think your sentence is cast. I'll put it that way. And then he talks about the judgment being that final judgment. Even though your sentence is already there, it's that final judgment, if you will. I don't think Jesus is not going to make a decision at that point, because what? Has the decision already been made? I think when you look at the rich man and Lazarus, I need to preach that sermon, don't I? I need to preach that, because what happens at death? Because that's the only reference we have, and we see that their judgment was cast at death when that happened.
He'll be reading from the book and basically telling you why you're going where you're going.
Yeah,
You've
here's
done this, you've done this, you've done this, you're going over here. You did this, you did this, you're going over there.
yeah. That book of life is another very interesting point. The book of life. What did we do?
It's really been what we did.
That goes really good with my lesson today. By the way, y'all are good about bringing this stuff up that goes with my lesson, because you're not going to do anything to earn your way to heaven, not one thing. But you have to live a life, right? And I'm not going to get into my sermon yet, but we have to live a life. So that book of life is interesting to me, and I think that's what is recorded there. You know, what is recorded there? And like I say, that'll be, here's where you're going and here's why. That's that. Here's that. The proof, if you will. I mean, that kind of what you think of it as.
I heard a guy talking one time about gravestones. He said you get the day of birth, the day of death. He said all the interesting stuff happened on the dash.
Yeah. In between. The in between. That's exactly right. And we got a lot deeper today than I thought we would.
Isn't that where the grace comes in?
That's where grace comes. Yeah, that's where grace comes in. And there again, we'll talk a lot about that in the sermon today, and then we can talk about it again next week. But you think about what I think of judgment. Who really determines what our judgment's going to be? We do. You know, we really decide, we determine by what we do in this life, we do determine where our judgment's gonna be kept. In other words, I can't change yours and you can't change mine. We'll all stand before the judgment seat. In other words, he's not gonna call Shacklet up and say, hey Shacklet, y'all all come up here, I'm gonna talk to y'all for a minute. No, it's gonna be, hey Gary, come up here, let's have a little chat, you know. And I'm being facetious because I don't know exactly how it's gonna be, but we're all individually gonna be there. But our life really dictates at that, and I see that as a sentencing of what our life has been. But there's also, at the point of death, there is a separation of spirit and body, and that spirit goes somewhere. And like I say, the rich man and Lazarus is the only reference we have of that Hadean realm, and one was, you know, being tormented, and the other one was in Abraham's bosom. And that's the only reference we have to that.
One thing that's kind of interesting is, you're talking about the final day of judgment. You gotta remember, some of us are not gonna pass away, we're not gonna die. That
Right.
last day, you're gonna have the living and the dead.
Right,
So the living is actually gonna be done on that day.
right.
But the ones who have already passed away, if they have already had their sentence,
Yeah.
or their conviction, it'd be different.
Right.
And
that's a great point. We're talking about two different groups of people, really.
Yeah.
It's those who have passed that will be resurrected, and then you got those who are still living during that time.
That's the end of time.
At the end of time, that will be the judgment, the quote unquote judgment day, totally for them. So you're talking about two different groups here. I'd rather be here when he comes. Wouldn't you like to witness that?
Yeah.
It'd be really scary, I think, but I think it'd be pretty powerful as well.
To go off what Harold thought there, the judgment of the soul seems like that's instantaneous by our measures, but who knows?
Yeah,
Where the mortal body, Christ will return. The mortal body, then there's going to be a decision made on you're in this line or that line, and so
this is the big mystery. What are we going to be? It's not going to be this body. We know that. He says we're going to have a new body like his.
but when he returns, we'll have.
When he returns, we're going to have a new body.
In the door,
Yeah,
he's going to say, you, and you.
yeah.
You're my goats, and you, and you, you're going over here.
Yeah, there's the judgment there, obviously. But what the physical body is going to be, we don't. Well, it's not going to be a physical body, but there again, what's it going to?
Worry about judgment.
Yeah, we just need to get right now, don't we? Let's make sure we're getting right now. That's our challenge is to make it there. That's our challenge. Let's make sure we're getting there the right way. But there again, is there a lot of mystery in there? There is. There's just, you know, I wish I could stand up here and say, okay, I'm going to tell you exactly what's going to happen.
If you knew, you wouldn't read it. So
Huh?
if you knew what was going to happen,
You wouldn't dread?
you
Yeah.
wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah, you wouldn't worry about it. And I think Jesus has done some things to us where we don't have to worry about it as much. But there again, we don't know exactly what that's going to be exactly like. But I don't think we can fathom it in our own minds. I think in our minds we can't fathom what that's even going to be like.
You know, one of the great beliefs in God is that we have got a universe that has no limits.
Yeah,
And when you think about something that has no limits, you've got to believe in God.
right,
I mean, everything has an end to it.
right.
But just to look at something and say it's gonna go on forever, it's just unbelievable.
Right. There's got to be a creator there. Yeah, a creator of that thing. So,
It's a mystery to me from where God came from
Now, he created everything, and then
Right.
that eternity will be his own, is
Right. I got a lot of questions. Got a lot of questions, but I think we all got a lot of questions. But there again, is where our faith comes in, isn't it? This is where our faith comes in. It's going to be done the right way now. So, boy, y'all made my head hurt this morning. But so let's start next week. We will go and we'll read 45. We'll start at 45, and it's really interesting what happens at the death of Christ. So to read that a little in depth of the things that happened, a lot of them were prophesied, and what that would have been like, to be there when these things happened in his death. So we'll start 45 next week.